Yes, this is DJ Ski, and this is the Sports Card Strategy Show. You already know there is no off season.
I'm Jeff Wilson, and I'm loving the content here on the Sports Card Strategy Show. There is no off season.
All right, you ready to rock?
Ready to go.
What's up, everybody? I'm Paul Hickey with NoOffSeason.com. This is the Sports Card Strategy Show. Don't forget to get a free 30-day trial at NoOffSeason.com today to help you make money flipping sports cards, build your sports card investment portfolio, get unlimited advice from our experts, and take sports card school to navigate the hobby. That's NoOffSeason.com. Get your free 30-day trial today. All the data we use on the Sports Card Strategy Show is from MarketMoversApp.com. Use code NOOFFSEASON at MarketMoversApp.com to get 20% off for life after a free 14-day trial. All right, let's get to the Sports Card Strategy. There's a big difference between making money flipping sports cards and breaking even when trying to make money flipping sports cards. And that's going to kind of be the theme of today's show. I'm Paul Hickey with NoOffSeason.com. With me is my guy, Lefty McKee. Sports Card Strategy Show. What's up, Lefty? How you doing, man?
Hey, we're live. Let's go, baby. Man, this is a good time. I have my yogurt drink in hand. Gary V has just said, let's get it going. So let's get it going by his recommendation. And just so everyone is as clear, I'm the king of breaking even this week. And gosh dang it, I'm pissed about it.
We're going to use one of your lessons to help the audience. And neither one of us really saw it coming, although it's a good one. So stay tuned for that. We're going to go through our top 5 cards to buy, graded, and flip. We're going to talk about football card selling season is here. College and pro selling season is here. But we're going to talk about, again, how to not just break even, how to make money. So stay tuned for that. We don't want you to be even, Steven. We want you to be making some money, honey. All right. So what are we selling? How are we selling? College and pro football season starts now, basically. The how are we selling is the big part that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about other backup NFL QBs to watch. Potentially the next Gardner Minshew. CGC Cards in the house. Good to see CGC Cards. Thanks for watching on the live stream. They are definitely a big part of this show. Are you ready to start grading your cards? CGC Cards is the perfect place to slab your favorite sports cards. From their crystal clear holders to their affordable pricing, CGC Cards is the perfect stop for your grading needs. Go to CGC Cards to start grading today. And what I'm doing, Lefty, I'm buying up a bunch of those green label Gem Mint CSG 9.5s because a lot of people don't know those are actually able to be sent into CGC Cards. And for a $5 fee per card, you get them sent back in a brand new label with a brand new holder. And that new label, CGC 10, is what you want. So pumped about that. I'm doing that actually with a lot of cards. Well, if we have time today, we'll talk about some of the upcoming releases. Let's jump right into it because top sports card opportunities to buy, already graded, and flip is where we want to be because there's really not enough time unless you're doing the Panini Instant thing that we talked about last week to get football cards graded and make money on them right now, unless it's a raw to grade play in the formula-based rankings of a top player, like a Joe Burrow or a CJ Stroud, I think would be guys that would fall into that category. So I want to talk about 2 quarterbacks today that the formula-based already graded rankings say are very undervalued. And the reason why the formula says they're very undervalued is because they have specific cards that are down right now based on where they were last September. So we're literally like days away from these cards going up. So if you can find them at their target cost, which people have this week, so it's not us pulling this target cost out of thin air. These are based on recent comps. you should be able to make money within the next couple of weeks buying these already graded cards. But we'll get into more of that selling strategy here in a second. So let's go through these opportunities. The first, none of this should surprise you if you are a loyal Sports Card Strategy Show listener. But the first quarterback we're going to talk about being undervalued is Tua.
Come on.
Tua is a guy that I would say many hobbyists would agree throughout this offseason has been selling for a lot less than what a quarterback of his ilk in his situation just got a massive contract coming off the best year of his career, still young, former Alabama starter. So he's got that fan base behind him down in Miami with a very high powered offense, tons of weapons. You got Devon Achane, Lefty's guy. You got Jalen Waddle, my guy. You got Tyreek Hill, everybody else's guy. And that's just scratching the surface of the offensive weapons they have down there. But the formula helps us prioritize which Tua cards to buy. So for example, his 2020 Optic Hollow PSA 10 goes for around $155 right now. That's only projected to be a $195 card later not this month, but in a few days, right? So in September, at some point when the NFL season starts, that card over the next month is a good way to say it, should go up around $40 conservatively. Now, if Tua has another 70-point outing for the Dolphins like he did in September last year against the Ravens, that'll go up to a lot more than $195 for sure. But we don't know if that's going to happen. So conservatively, it should go up about $40. But what the formula helps us do, Lefty, is $40 enough? And the formula says you'll only make 1% on that card. So while we love that card, you actually need a massive Tua performance spike to have that card go up. So if you think there's a massive Tua performance spike coming, that's probably the card with the most upside that we're going to talk about today. But it's not the one that the formula thinks is the best opportunity. And there's a couple more that the formula says from a Tua standpoint, you can make 24% on with a lot cheaper buy-in price. One is his 2020 Donruss 302 Canvas PSA 10. $42 target cost based on the most recent comps. It's a $65 card in September at some point throughout September. So that would give you a 24% ROI on that card. His Mosaic debut, NFL debut 262 in PSA 10 is only a $27 buy-in. It's a $42 card in September conservatively. That's a 24% ROI as well. So not as sexy of cards for Tua, not as much upside, but if you don't get a performance spike, you make 23% more ROI on those two cards. So that's what we're trying to help you do. Now, Lefty, before I turn it over to you, I want to talk about a few more Tua cards. So the Prism base PSA 10 should not be forgotten about. His 2020 Prism base PSA 10 339 is only $46 right now. I would argue that that's a card that is not only conservatively a $75 card in September, but also has some pretty serious upside. Like we've seen base Prism PSA 10s of the top quarterbacks go for easily over $100. Joe Burrow's goes for $125, $135 right now. We know Turner, who's in the live chat, we know he's been buying that Joe Burrow card. I've been buying that Joe Burrow card. So I think Tua, the base Prism PSA 10, not only does the formula say that it's conservatively a 30% ROI in September, but I would argue that one probably has as much upside as any of the other cards we're going to talk about today. Lefty, let me pause there because we've only heard from me so far on this show. We've got a couple more cards to talk about in general, two more Tua cards and then a different quarterback. But Lefty, what say you so far on these Tua plays? What do you think?
I think Tua is a great play because the offense that he runs in is going to have weeks that he's going to score immeasurable amounts of points. And what I mean by that is fantasy points. And typically when cards or quarterbacks are high in fantasy value, they're going to be high in sports card value. Unlike any other sport, this sport is once a week, and there are so many people playing fantasy football, and a quarterback is a premium position there. And I think that plays into the auction amount or the viewership on eBay more than any other sport in terms of the wins. Like the performance spikes of football players is astronomically higher than other sports because there's so many people that are tuning in once a week to watch their favorite quarterback. And so for Tua, I think these cards conservatively is the right thing to say here, because I think that Tua Prism card, for instance, I imagine it'll sell for $100 at least once this year, and so that's a 50% return, or a more than 50% return on your margin. And another thing about these specific cards that we've talked about outside of the Tua Optic Hollow, they are all in what I like to call interners range. So you don't have to be super wealthy to get into these cards. These cards, the most expensive one outside of the Optic Hollow one that we've talked about is the Donruss, or is the Prism Base at $46. And that's pretty obtainable. And so, like, I don't want to disrespect anybody, and that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you can load up on these effectively, and it's fairly low risk in my mind for that Tua is going to be able to see these price margins go higher than this. It's been several years, or last year he did a pretty good job of staying healthy. I would assume that that's the same for this year. And the offense is still going to be high profile and high engagement. So Tyreek Hill is going to help him take the top off of a lot of defenses, and they're not going anywhere. So expect this high profile, speedy offense to take this profit margin speedy north of $100. I would imagine on at least the Prism card, maybe even more of these.
We've got at least 2 more Tua cards to talk about. I'm going to give a shout out to everyone in the live chat real quick. Arrowwood's Hobby Shop says Tua always seems undervalued this time of year. We're bringing the data to prove that. Joel in the house, Turner in the house. Real quick, shout out to everybody live on Instagram. North Strands Collects, the card collector with a K. Surgery with 3 Ys. Matt Smith, Meyer Clay, Matt Ballantyne, Slabs Arena, V-Bros Collectibles, Johnny Utah Sports Cards, Asony 23, G23 Cards, Dark Side Comics, Danielson Sports Cards, what's up? Athlete, Priceless Collectibles, they call me Chef, Cody Campbell, Integrity Sports Cards, Matt Solomon, what's up, Matt? Good to see Matt Solomon. He is a premium member at nooffseason.com. Just signed up for the one-on-one package. If you're interested in working directly with me one-on-one, email paul@nooffseason.com and I'll get back to you right away. Just say you're interested in the one-on-one strategist package. Okay, 2 more Tua cards for the time being. Lefty, you and I always say this. We don't love Select, but Tua's 2020 Select 45 Concourse PSA 10. This is like his most pedestrian Select card. $26 buy-in. But this is a $50 card in September, which means that's a 54% ROI. Seems like a pretty easy win if you can get it at that target cost. And if you go to nooffseason.com, click on the formula-based sports card rankings and click on that card, there'll be a direct link into eBay searches for that PSA 10. And hopefully you can find one around the $26 target cost. Many other people have recently. So that's the data we're going on. And then his Donruss base PSA 10 out of 2020 is also a $26 card and a $50 card in September conservatively. So 54% ROI. So we just gave you 5 Tua cards to make at least 24 to 54% ROI on, and then 1 Tua card with massive upside, the Optic Hollow PSA 10, that the formula says you'll only make 1% on right now, not taking into account potential performance spike. So again, if you like Tua or if you don't like Tua, there's a lot. And if you have a lot of money or you don't have a lot of money, there's many ways to make money on Tua cards, but you got to move quick. Now, the other quarterback is this card's been, it was at the top of the formula-based sports card rankings during the offseason. It's still a card you can make 35% on. I wanted to throw this in here because the data on Baker Mayfield has indicated that there's a lot of opportunities with Baker Mayfield. Now, Lefty, I don't know what the audience's thoughts are. Drop a comment below at youtube.com/Paul Hickey. Or just comment on any of our Instagram posts at Sports Card Strategy. Follow us there and comment on any of our Instagram posts about Baker Mayfield in reply to this question. So pick your platform, youtube.com/Paul Hickey or Instagram at Sports Card Strategy. But I just want to know, like, is Baker low? Like, has he lost all of his hype? Has he lost all of his flash, his sizzle in the hobby? I mean, to me, this is a guy that plays for potentially a playoff team, has proven that he's a solid NFL starter. He's a former number 1 overall pick. He has the draft capital. He has great cards. Granted, they're in another team's uniform. Is it because he's bounced around the league? Is it because he hasn't really had a consistently solid career? Why is Baker Mayfield's Optic Hollow PSA 10 only $74? It should be a $125 card over the next month. So there's 35% ROI there for that card. Now, it's very, very hard to find that card at that price, but that is the most recent comp, and it is very, very recent. So people are finding it for that price, and everything goes on the last comp's price. If you go to the listings, you're probably not going to find any buy it now or best offer anywhere near $74. But there have been auctions that have closed at $74 for that card. So that means that you can go negotiate and try to find that card for $74. Lefty, is Baker Mayfield a guy that you're looking at all? Are you fading him?
I think I'm not fading him to start the season because very similar to Tua, he has common haters. Like, everybody loves to hate these guys until they show up on the field, and then everybody loves to love them. And for some reason, they both fit the profile of too small, weird throwing, like, oh, this stuff. Like, you could literally just, if you put the stats side by side, I'm sure there are other quarterbacks in the NFL that are doing just as good as they are, but they maybe look more like a professional quarterback. And both of these guys suffer from maybe bad PR, even though they're both, are good dudes, that people just don't believe in them. And until every year, they have to come and show up and prove themselves. Now, Baker hasn't always showed up and proved himself, and Tua hasn't always stayed healthy. So there is, like, the things you can look back on. But, the most recency of both of these guys is they took both of their teams to the playoffs. I mean, that division that Baker is in is up for grabs. It's going to be somebody that we don't expect to win the Super Bowl. All 4 of those teams are not high profile and high scoring octane offenses. It's going to be a surprise for somebody. And I would throw Baker's percentage up there pretty high that this is going to be a playoff team. So I love Baker. I'm a Browns fan. I was sad when he left, and now we have what we have at quarterback, and that's a whole different story. But I love Baker because he has the Tony Romo effect where everybody loves to hate him until he shows up, and then everybody knows how to love him. And so, man, this Donruss card that you just threw up is one of my favorites because it looks like a legacy card. Like, it looks like a card that has the ability to be a long-term, like, this is one of my favorite looking cards just because of how clean it is.
I wanted to bring up this Donruss card because this is why I love the formula at nooffseason.com. The formula-based sports card rankings do not like this card. They like the Optic PSA 10 because of the margin that exists from the $74 to the $125. But when you look at the Donruss-based PSA 10, even though it's only $35, it never has really reached a selling marker where you could make any profit on this for real. Like, its high over the last 35 days is $50. And that's been immediate post playoffs. When he's still relevant. But even when he was heading into Detroit to take on the Lions last year in one of the biggest one of the, most massively hyped up playoff games that there was last year, even especially for Lions fans, yes, but even non-Lions fans were watching that game to see if the Lions could win and go to the NFC Championship game, which of course they did. But going into that game, this card only sold for $44. So the formula looks at stuff like this. It's not just going to be, oh, does market movers say it's down? It's going to be what will it sell for conservatively? And so for that reason, we like the Baker Mayfield Optic Hollow PSA 10 is an example of when you pay the extra $30, $40 for a card, you're going to make money versus trying to get the cheap one for $35. Whereas in the Tua situations, there were a lot of cheaper cards that still have upside. So
that's why math is your friend in this scenario.
We know math is my friend. We know I am all about the math. And I think many of you are taking that ride with me because you don't want to break even. You want to make money. And that's what Lefty and I broke even for too many years before we started making money. And that's why we're so passionate about it. So, Lefty, I wanted to originally the show notes were going to be, what are we selling? But then I kind of started to think like, let's make sure we talk more about how we are selling. Because I think, the general blanket statement of today's show is that everybody needs to start getting all of their football cards, especially their top quarterbacks and their top college quarterbacks and other college players like Travis Hunter and some of the other guys that we've talked about. Many, many of you are loyal Sports Card Strategy Show listeners. Many, many of you are new. We're going to try to make this show relevant for everybody every week. For many of you that have been with us for a long time, a lot of the names are going to seem familiar to you. We've talked about plays related to Riley Leonard becoming Notre Dame's starter. He's going to open up his first game this week. We've talked about Carson Beck.
Against who, by the way?
Notre Dame plays
Texas
A&M. I knew it. Giga Mags, although I don't really want that to happen because I've got quite a bit invested in Riley Leonard. So
they are the favorite going into that game, and they are heavily outranked. It's kind of crazy.
Number 7 Notre Dame at number 20 Texas A&M. That is a primetime game, 7:30 Eastern time this Saturday. So that is like,
guarantee you I'll be watching that.
You can guarantee I'll be watching too, because Riley Leonard, I've got about 5 or 6 Riley Leonard Bowman Chrome first prospect autos, and he's the first guy on my list to talk about today because he's easy to forget about. The reason I bought those cards, and I bought them on the Sports Card Strategy Show in an earlier episode this offseason with Connor, is I bought them because of this game, literally because of this game. So I'm getting my Riley Leonard drafts ready in my eBay account. That's what I want all of you doing. Don't start the listing yet. This is the how that we're going to get into in a second, so stay tuned for that. But Carson Beck, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, even Jackson Dart. These are guys that we've talked about on the Sports Card Strategy Show. Hopefully you already bought them. Hopefully you're not necessarily rushing out to buy them right now because they've all been moving up slightly over the last 30 days. Not to a point where it's like, hey, we need to sell these guys or we need to list these guys, but they've all been moving up slightly. 10%, 12%, 13%, 15%, maybe even 20% depending on the card. But that's probably not enough to get you the profit. For example, I bought a Carson Beck Bowman Chrome first prospect auto refractor out of $4.99 PSA 10. I bought that in the offseason for around $270. Well, it sold 2 days ago, Monday, August 26th, for $260. Right. So it's like, now let's go into the how, because I think we could use this example with a lot of pro quarterbacks. We could use this example with a lot of pro and college quarterbacks and position players. Lefty, I want to ask you made a comment on Lefty cards about a Lamar Jackson card that you bought, I believe, at the National. What's your selling strategy approaching? Because a week 1 of the NFL season is not this weekend. It's not this weekend. But we have games starting Thursday the 5th in Brazil. We have a primetime game there. We have a primetime game on Friday the 6th we have like the whole week 1 slate. Everybody jacked, everybody pumped. So I think the audience is kind of wondering, and we're going to break this down. Do we list in 7 to 10 day auctions to end across week 1? Do we list and buy it now or best offers? Lefty, what are you doing specifically with this Lamar Jackson card? Tell us about it.
So I have a Lamar Jackson Blue Laser PSA 10. I bought it for $380, and there are 2 currently listed online for $800. If I get close to that, I'll be ecstatic. But there are also others listed for $575, and then the last one to sell. Excuse me. The last one to sell sold right around $430. So I am up already on this card, which is why it has been a little curious to me. But so on Lefty Cards, I talked about, I thought I was going to list it as soon as the game started against Patrick Mahomes. I now am kind of rethinking that strategy because of a couple of different factors, and largely because of what we're going to talk about in a little bit with my Gardner Minshew that happened. I'm rethinking the strategy around Lamar Jackson, because Lamar Jackson is a guy that I believe will be fighting for an MVP status again this season. He has the weapons around him, and he's got the stats to prove it. And he also, he's a legacy quarterback at this point. You can count on him to have big performances, and he hasn't had seasons where he's been super injured and things like that. So he's a premier quarterback. What I'm going to do at this point is what I think will happen on Thursday night in Brazil is I think both Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes will go crazy. I think
that's going to be Friday night. Thursday night in Brazil is the Packers-Eagles.
Oh, okay. I thought it was switched. I thought the Packers-Eagles was on Friday. But anyway, so the Friday night game, when that happens in Brazil, this will go crazy.
In America. The Brazil game is the Eagles and the Packers. The Friday night game is the Chiefs and the Ravens. The Brazil game is Thursday, the Packers and the Eagles.
Okay.
Sorry.
Regardless of when this happens or where it happens, I believe that neither of these defenses will be there. I feel like it'll be just an absolute shootout. And
I think we're both wrong. I'm going to interrupt you again. The Ravens and the Chiefs are Thursday, September 5th. But the Brazil game is Friday, September 6th. So we were both a little off. Sorry. You think this is going to be a shootout. My bad. Keep going.
I do think it's going to be a shootout. And I think that Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson's value will steadily rise. And so if that is the case, then I will list him either during or after the game. But originally I was going to list them before that game started in anticipation of it being the first game of the NFL season. I think with the hype of the NFL season starting, and with that, I believe I could make probably around $200 on this card if it goes to the way I want it to make. And so that'll be a 30-ish% profit margin on a pretty nicely weighted card. So that'll be pretty nice. So, but in regards to when and how, I'm going to wait until after I see him prove it on the field.
Love it. Yeah, I love it. I think this is the natural progression that we all think about when we come to listing our sports cards, where it's like, should I list this to end during the game? Should I list it to end before the game? Should I list it to start during the game? And I think, so Lefty and I have talked a lot about this. We're going to talk more about this on Friday's premium pod for premium members at nooffseason.com. The selling strategy of what do you do? And what Lefty and I have landed on is it definitely depends on the card. Mm-hmm. It obviously depends on the player, but even further than that, it depends on the card, and it depends on what you're into the card for, right? Mm-hmm. So Lefty in a situation where, look, because it's Lamar Jackson and it's an NFL MVP. It's someone with high expectations. It's someone who's in a lot of primetime games, always going to get opportunities, potential Super Bowl contender, for the Ravens. So when anyone fits that profile, and there's several of those players this year that fit the Lamar Jackson profile that I just described, I think you're in a situation where you want to list how Lefty's doing it, where if if and when they have a massive performance, you go and list. And that's why I think the move is to get your eBay drafts ready. That's the theme of today's show is how to sell so that you don't break even, so that you make money. And I think the tactic behind the theme of today's show is get your eBay drafts ready.
Yeah,
and
that's
then that
something
way,
I'll spend all day on today is making sure that all of my football cards are ready to go.
absolutely. I blocked off my calendar for like sometime tomorrow, sometime Friday, just to make sure all my eBay drafts are ready, literally for all of the football cards that I have right now.
Yep.
And I'm excited. I think it's fun because I think that's the strategic way to do it in terms of when you are out, if you're out and about with the family on a Sunday and somebody pops off in a 1 p.m. Eastern time game, you don't have to stop what you're doing. You can just go take some stinker tinker time, go into your drafts and make that fucker live. You don't have to rush home in the middle of family time.
I go to poop.
I got to poop. I'm going to go make my draft live. And it takes two taps. One Face ID, 2 or 3 taps, and you're good to go. All right. So, good stuff, Lefty, on the Lamar Jackson. I mean, that's exactly what I'm doing with all of my Riley Leonards, Carson Beck, Shadors, Travis Hunters, Jackson, even the few Jackson darts that I have, and all of the pro quarterbacks that I'm holding. So I'm not holding many skill position players. But I do have some Bijan Robinson shares still that I'm excited about. I do have some Amon-Ra St. Brown shares that I'm excited about still. And I've got some pro cards in grading right now that I'm okay with being in grading. You know, they're guys like they're veteran quarterbacks or they're high-end young quarterbacks like CJ Stroud that I don't think their value is going anywhere. So got to be careful not to overreact. Don't blow our loads too early with the start of the NFL season. It is exciting, but I think it's a step-by-step process to selling these cards. Lefty, one thing we've talked about throughout the offseason too, which we've had fun with, is backup quarterbacks, right? Mm-hmm. Everyone's got a little bit of FOMO when it comes to sports cards, especially football cards, and I think especially taking it a step further, backup quarterback cards. Because we all know that if we can predict the backup quarterback, we can actually make a lot of money if a starter gets injured, and then if that backup plays well. Now, before we get into some more backup quarterback plays, let's talk about a guy who was a backup, became the starter. You listed him, Gardner Minshew. What happened? What happened with your Gardner Minshew listings, and what lessons do you want to tell the audience about?
So for me, I played it exactly like I wanted to play it. You know, I looked at the formula. I said, okay, this card is undervalued. I went out and got into some auctions on the card, got in the cards in the range that I wanted to be comfortable buying this card. You know, I did all this correctly with the expectation that I believed he was going to be the starting quarterback week 1 of the Las Vegas Raiders. He gets announced that Las Vegas Raiders quarterbacks room has decided that Gardner Minshew is going to be the starter. Couldn't have been more excited. I got my listings ready. I listed 2 of them, one on a 7-day auction, one on a 10-day auction. The 7-day auction ended on Sunday, and the 10-day auction ends later tonight. But I ended up making $1 more than what I bought it for at the time. So with those of you that know how eBay is, I've lost a very small amount of money, but I've lost money on this Gardner Minshew play so far. So what did I potentially do wrong? And so, as you guys know, we're always looking at our situations. We're trying stuff all the time to help us try to get better and better at sports cards. And we are looking at this situation. I said, okay, all the markers that I thought were going to be the markers that were, and to be fair, both of us thought this. Both of us thought as soon as the starter was announced, then I should list this card. We listed 2 of them. I held one of them back. I'm going to hold one of them back for the selling marker for when he wins his first game as a Raider or something like that. But the card not selling for anything more than before he was a starter as announced is interesting to me. So it's a firm I just talked about this a second ago, but it is a realization that I need to not do this with Lamar Jackson. I need to not list this in expectation of his market going up. I need to watch his market rise and then list the card. And so it's an interesting little thing. And luckily with the Gardner Minshew play is I spent $18 on the card. It's a PSA 10 quarterback for $18. Like I thought that's a pretty low risk play. So it was a good card to do this with, but at the same time, not a play that I ended up making money on. And so I am now in the captain seat of captain break even. And that is not the seat that we want to be in at the Sports Card Strategy Show.
Great stuff. And thanks for sharing. It's always nice, I think, when we talk about our learning experiences, because we're winning a lot, but we always say we're probably winning about 30% of the time and we're breaking even around 70% of the time, which is good. Like Lefty broke even. I mean, he shared a loss. Really, he probably lost a few bucks, if that. But like, here's what's interesting about that. So Gardner Minshew, we had this card in the formula and we talked about it on the show, and Lefty bought it off of those things. And also because he loves Gardner Minshew. But this was when he was looking like the backup to Aiden O'Connell, but that was in the offseason. This was back in like late May or early June, maybe. And so Lefty bought the cards. We had them in the formula. I think it maybe around $15 entry price. What's interesting is that one sold on August 25th for $28.99 and for $35. The same card Lefty sold in an auction for around $20, like maybe $19.50, maybe $20. There was one that sold on one bid in an auction on August 26th. But what's interesting about it is the ones that sold for the most were the people who were like, buy it now or best offer. And so I think it's just like, I've fully been an auction guy. But one sold in an auction on the same day, August 25th, on 5 bids for $15.50. Another one sold $19. So they're selling for like significantly less. I mean, from a percentage standpoint, significantly less. Even though from a dollar standpoint, it doesn't seem like much. That's your margin. So I'm thinking that what I've learned,
the amount of cards on eBay.
It's the same. I think it's the same thing that Lefty has talked about already, which is we're seeing across all sports massive profits happening at performance spikes and not necessarily just simply on news announcements. But in between that is the relevancy of being on the field. So I think that like, when someone's on the field, I've seen prices be more than during the news announcement.
Yeah.
But then when someone's on the field with a performance spike, that's when you really cash in. So I've actually started to alter my sports card strategy to still be really, really conservative with what I buy into, not needing a performance spike, but knowing that I'm going to profit the most on a performance spike. So it doesn't really change my buying strategy so much as it's changed my selling strategy, which is what we're talking about. So before we get into who I think could be the next Gardner Minshew, should be kind of a fun discussion, and a couple other backup quarterbacks to prospect on. Carton Hasderoy, Nick Prism, J-Rock Jag, Brian Friedman, Sports Card Spotlight, Adrian Charlie, Bam Cards, Jerry Petrie, Phantom Cards, Nico Man, AW Nelson 82, Goat Banger Cards, Sup, 305 Cards, join on Instagram, Arturo Torres in the house on youtube.com/Paul Hickey. Everybody on Apple and Spotify, that's where most of you are. Shout out to all of you as well. Other backup QBs to watch, I got to give credit to Andy Kaysen at Football Card Quest for these, because these were his plays of the week right here on the Sports Card Strategy Show feed. Football Cards Market Report yesterday, the episode dropped, so go back and check that one out too. But he talks about Josh Dobbs and Carson Wentz, and the reason he talks about Josh Dobbs and Carson Wentz are really two reasons. Number one, they're the clear backups on their team with a lot of experience under their belt in real NFL game action, and they've each had real success in the NFL. So, one kind of more than the other in different ways. But the reason number two is that they each play on Super Bowl contending teams. They're each on the Super Bowl teams from last year that are looking to get back to the Super Bowl. And each of these franchises have been in a ridiculous amount of the past Super Bowls. So talking about the 49ers and the Chiefs, you've got Josh Dobbs backing up Brock Purdy, and you've got Carson Wentz backing up Patrick Mahomes. Now, it would be horrible for the football card market and for the NFL, I believe, if Patrick Mahomes goes down due to injury and we see Carson Wentz. But just imagine if it's not like a serious Mahomes injury, maybe he's out for like a week or 3, and Wentz comes in and pulls a Cooper Rush or a Mike White or dude in Cincinnati last year who played well in relief of Joe Burrow. Any of the, or Josh Dobbs from last year. Josh Dobbs did it. If Carson Wentz comes in and does that, his cards would go up significantly, as would Josh Dobbs's cards. So Dobbs's 2017 Prism Silver Raw has sold 13 times in the last 14 days. That's significantly the market telling us there's something there. People are going after Josh Dobbs. So before we get into who I think could be in the discussion of being the next Gardner Minshew, Lefty, what do you think about this backup quarterback strategy? We've talked about Hendon Hooker. We've talked about Justin Fields. We've talked about Sam Howell and a lot of others. Also Sam Darnold before J.J. McCarthy went down, even though he was technically the starter at the time. What do you think of the backup quarterback strategy? It's kind of like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. And then you've got a lot of different guys to try to prospect on, including Dobbs and Wentz, who Andy thinks are good buys right now.
Yeah, I'm big on the backup quarterback strategy as a play, but personally, I think you can spread yourself so thin here. You just got to be careful on who you get into. A guy like Josh Dobbs is a guy that I would more than certainly look to acquire, because Josh Dobbs is a really fun watch. He's an extremely intelligent quarterback. He's in quarterback rooms and he's gotten opportunities with multiple teams to become the starter. I would be less excited to become a Carson Wentz owner just because I've seen him not do what is expected more times than I've seen him do what is expected. Like if you look at Carson Wentz versus Josh Dobbs in this scenario, Josh Dobbs has exceeded our expectations many times. Like he gets on the field and everybody's like, oh, he's going to play horribly. And then he goes out there and plays well. Many times Carson Wentz has gone on the field and like, surely the Colts are going to win because they got Carson Wentz on the field. And he goes out and throws 3 or 4 interceptions. And you're like, oh God, they barely made it. And so it's just a different kind of narrative coming forward. So for those two guys specifically, I would be more excited about Josh Dobbs, probably because without looking at it, I would assume that Josh Dobbs is a little cheaper than Carson Wentz, just because Carson Wentz was a premier name at one point and still probably carries a little more value because of his name recognition. But Josh Dobbs is no slouch. But there are other quarterbacks out there. For instance, Turner just put in there Justin Fields. That's a backup quarterback that is almost not a backup quarterback in terms of pricing, because so many people expect him to be the starter at some point for the Steelers offense. I would be willing to go out there and get some Jameis Winston cards, because Deshaun Watson has shown that he's maybe teetering on not being able to do it. And Jameis Winston, when he got promoted last year, his card did go up pretty significantly. So Jameis Winston might be a fun play to look at if you're looking at cards that are undervalued right now. I would look at guys that commonly get injured. I know everybody loves to love Joe Burrow, but he does have a history of getting injured. Maybe the guy behind him is a guy that you can be looking at. And no one freaking knows what's going to go on in Dallas this season. So if Dak Prescott doesn't do well, look out. That could be pretty crazy. But then Trey Lance also threw like 4 interceptions in the preseason game. So just be careful, guys. It's a strategy that's fun to play, but it's also very volatile and can get you in a little bit of you can get under pretty fast, I would assume.
Yeah. And I agree. You can spread yourself too thin. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. For those of you screaming at your phones as you're listening to this on Apple and Spotify, we know it's Jake Browning. Jake Browning is Joe Burrow's backup, and he did play really well last year. He only really has like one solid card. His 2019 Panini Score auto is kind of, you know, the Jake Browning card that you would want. He was really only printed in Score, and he does have some Panini Instants from last year. His Panini Instants from last year, he has a serial numbered Panini Instant out of 149. And there's some Panini Instant PSA 10s. People had them graded during the Jake Browning craze last year. But I mean, the Score, like the Panini Score Jake Browning card, again, we don't want to see Patrick Mahomes go down. We don't want to see even really Brock Purdy go down, to be honest with you. We don't want to see Joe Burrow go down, certainly. But if you do go buy Jake Browning's 2019 Panini Score auto PSA 10 or non-auto PSA 10, you can make some money, because if Joe Burrow does go down and Jake Browning comes in, you can make some money. And even Jameis Winston with Deshaun Watson potentially. You know, I ordered Spencer Rattler Panini Instant cards that I'm selling. They're selling for around $9 a pop. I got them for around half that Panini Instant. And people are prospecting on Derek Carr, you know, like, so it's everywhere, and you can spread yourself too thin. So you need to make sure that if you're going to do the backup QB strategy, don't spend too much money on it. Don't make it too big of your sports card investment portfolio, but there is massive upside because there are real selling markers with these backup quarterbacks. One more backup quarterback that I wanted to talk about, mainly because the data is forcing me to talk about him, because every week on the Football Card Market Report on the Sports Card Strategy feed that comes out every Tuesday, I look at all the football card data, and most weeks I look at backup quarterback sales volume. It's been Justin Fields, who you mentioned a minute ago, and it's been Hendon Hooker pretty much all offseason in the backup quarterback department. But a new name has taken the lead, Lefty McKee.
Let's
and
go.
I want to see if you can guess it. And it's a guy that I think could be the next Gardner Minshew, not necessarily from a performance standpoint, because that probably hasn't gotten anyone excited, but from a cult following standpoint, Gardner Minshew has a big cult following because of his, I don't know, living out of a trailer BS with a mustache and long hair and all that stuff. This guy has a little bit of mystique around him as well, and he's overtaken Justin Fields and Hendon Hooker in the sales volume single category for backup quarterbacks in the NFL. Lefty, I'm going to give you 30 seconds. You get one guess now.
It's not fair, though. I looked at the show notes.
Lefty, you totally
I'm going to guess Tyson Bagent.
Tyson Bagent of the Chicago Bears. If you were screaming at your phones, Tyson Bagent, you were right. Now, a couple things. Have we said the word hyper relevancy on this episode yet?
I don't know if we said it on this one. We might have said it on the earlier episode we recorded.
I think it's worth saying it, whether or not we've said it. Hyper relevancy can come in many forms, but HBO Max's Hard Knocks is out, and there's been 3 or 4 episodes dropped, and there's probably going to be at least a few more dropping. Tyson Bagent of the Chicago Bears has looked good in the preseason. He's looked great on Hard Knocks. His dad is like the world champion arm wrestler with either arm. His right and left-handed arm wrestling, and Tyson Bagent is like this 6'5" Division II quarterback who played well last year. The Bears chose him over let's not forget, the Bears traded Justin Fields for like a 5th round draft pick. Like, they could have got a 5th round draft pick they could have kept Justin Fields, drafted Caleb Williams, and got a 5th round pick for Tyson Bagent. They chose Tyson Bagent over Justin Fields to be Caleb Williams' backup. And this guy's pretty freaking good. His Optic Hollow 2023 Raw, which is his rookie card. Let's not forget he's in that He's printed more in that optic release than he was printed in Prism because nobody knew who he was last year. So Tyson Bagent, 2023 optic hollow rated rookie raw, sold 30 times in the last 7 days, Lefty. Average sale price $4.84. I mean, I don't want Caleb Williams to go down either because I love the guy, but Tyson Bagent could be that guy who ticks up in value as well.
Yeah, the Bajan, like with the arm wrestling thing and all that thing, the lore of him, and I think he was a Division II quarterback and a bunch of other things, reminds me of the lore of Tommy DeVito, the guy that's on the Giants. He's technically their third string right now, but if that guy ever gets back in the game and his dad looks like a mobster and his name is DeVito and he's from New York, and like if that guy gets back in, his cards are fun to acquire as well.
And this isn't something, like, I know a lot of people listen to this show and they get really, really excited about these possibilities. And I don't take that lightly. So this backup QB strategy isn't something that has a time limit on it. Like if you were to buy into any of the guys' rookie cards that we've talked about on this episode, or any of the guys' rookie cards that we've talked about throughout the offseason in terms of these backup quarterback plays, and we've got a lot of them too in the formula-based rankings. We've got Mac Jones in there. We've talked about Trey Lance. We've got so there are actually multiple selling markers for these guys. Like Hendon Hooker popped off in the preseason, played really well last week, and he might not sniff the field this year in the regular season, but there could be another selling marker for all these guys next preseason. Their starters could go down next year. So if you're spending the right amount of money for your portfolio on these backup QB strategies that we're talking about, they don't have to materialize this year. You hold them in a specific box that says backup QBs, and as soon as
that's a good point,
the starter does go down, which it will have. I mean, look at the NFL. Go back for any of us who have played fantasy football over the last 20 years, even though over the last 2 years, there is historical patterns that tell us the starter will go down for 1 to 3 weeks. If not the entire Tom Brady, Matt Castle came in for the greatest quarterback of all time. And Matt Castle was a legit fantasy starter for 1 season. So there's precedence for this, not just the Mike Whites and Cooper Rushes of the world and Jake Brownings of the world, but this is a real thing. So if you can be patient.
You know who the best backup quarterback of all time is?
No, who is it?
Aaron Rodgers.
Oh my God, you're right. God, that's horrible. That's horrible. You're absolutely right. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was Brett Favre's backup for what, 6 years? Around 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, imagine if you had bought the backup quarterbacks back then and you bought Aaron Rodgers' card as like a security relief for Favre.
That quarterback that I don't like to mention the name of just got brought up. But Lefty, you're right, man. You're absolutely right. So and thank you for helping prove this point even further on the Sports Card Strategy Show in terms of investing in backup quarterbacks. For every, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but for every Brian Hoyer, Jimmy Garoppolo, there's an Aaron Rodgers, right? I mean,
yep.
So just it's like everything else. You got to get get it for the right price, get it at the right time, and you're putting yourself in a position to win. And you've got a real selling marker. And I think that, a lot of you will ask me like, well, what's the exit strategy if the starter doesn't go down? It's the preseason. Look at preseason sales data for guys. So if you buy in at the right price, like better yet, I mean, buying in to a Josh Dobbs card after Brock Purdy, like let's say Brock Purdy's an MVP candidate after 6 weeks. Now buy the Josh Dobbs card because, and look at his contract, make sure he's going to be there at least a few years or whatever. And then say like, okay, well, Josh Dobbs is probably going to play the entire preseason, or a good bit of the preseason. And people buy this. If you haven't been following us or you haven't caught the episodes where we've talked about the preseason sales data, the sell alerts. Text sports cards to 1-833-992-5727. We've sent out some sell alerts recently on preseason NFL sales data. It's crazy. It just because these guys are playing on the field against vanilla defenses, their prices go up. So I think that the backup quarterback strategy, exit strategy, if the starter doesn't go down and it doesn't materialize when your portfolio needs it to, is the preseason. So Lefty, great show today. I think let's talk real quick about any of the upcoming releases that we want to just hit on. And I will say this: next Monday, this upcoming Monday, it's Labor Day, not Memorial Day. It's Labor Day. I am going to drop an episode that I will break down NFL and college football. It's going to be an NFL and college football season preview from a position by position standpoint. So if there wasn't enough football for you on today's show, there's going to be all football, very, very detailed, broken down, position by position, buy, sell, hold, all that stuff. Flyers, Monday. So get pumped for that. But sports card releases this week. Topps Pristine Baseball on Friday the 30th. 10 cards per pack, 6 cards per box. Panini Boys of Summer Baseball today. 8 cards per pack, 1 pack per box. Let's save the biggest one for last year. 2023 Panini Select Football, August 30th. That's actually a pretty big one.
Yeah, that's a big
2023 one. Topps Composite Football this Friday. That's actually a pretty big one. 2024 Upper Deck MVP Hockey today. Not a big one. And the biggest one, 2023-24 Topps Chrome Basketball today.
Yep.
We talked about the pre-sale earlier on the Basketball Card Market Report and on the Sports Card Strategy Show. But I mean, 2023 Panini Select Football, that's significant this Friday as well as Topps Composite Football this Friday. Those are both 2 significant releases. I expect the singles sales coming out of those releases to drive some of the prices down for the prisms and the optics of the top guys like CJ Stroud, AR, and that's what I would go back and buy into. We've already seen the Topps Chrome Basketball singles hit the market for Wemby. Lefty, talk about that real quick. You and Turner did the research on that.
Yeah, this card it's the one card in this set that is worth buying in this set because it's not as obvious that it's non-licensed because you can see Wembanyama and he's got a black and white jersey, looks like a Spurs jersey, and it's not obvious that it doesn't say Spurs on it. And they did a great job with this card to be the premier the premier card of what this is. But this card is already super inflated. I mean, auctions are already out there for people that had this product release early or also are expecting to open a bunch of boxes and expecting at least a couple of Chrome cards and things. I bet the auto of this card is astronomical as soon as it hits the shelf. But this card, just like you said, makes me want to go back and get the Prism now because the Prism card might take a hit when this card comes out. And that's the card I think that long-term is the card that's going to be valuable. This card looks great because of the way that Topps has designed it. So props to Topps because of that. But it's not the card that you want. It's still unlicensed. And speaking of unlicensed, Boys of Summer, gross. Golly. This is a unlicensed baseball card that has Paul Skeens with just a yellow hat looking like a referee or something. Good grief. Couldn't be less excited about that release. And I know I don't like Select, but these Select cards look better than they have previously. So maybe that is a card set that I'm moving into. And the Topps 2023 Composite Football, that's also unlicensed for those of you that are not aware of that as well. Anthony Richardson, they put him on there because Colts don't have big logos and stuff like that either. And so it's kind of hard to notice, but it also is unlicensed. Just be aware of what you're buying into. You're buying an unlicensed product. And this Wembanyama card will be highly circulated, but it still is not going to be the card, I believe, long-term that is the one to buy.
Yeah, and even if you want to make a play on that card, don't do it now.
Absolutely not.
Wait a couple months. Better yet, wait until December. Buy all this stuff all the stuff that's coming out now, buy it in December, because typically the prices go down for the new releases. Like, I mean, I look at the data all the time. I'll tell you 2 to 3 months, 2.5 months after a new release, typically even for the top players singles, they're down 50%. So that's when you buy in.
Maybe we should start looking at this segment, what released 3 months ago.
Yeah.
That we can now go buy.
We absolutely should. And so the December time period also falls within that. So you could actually see the Wemby. Like, I don't think Wemby is going to stop being a hot commodity. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying your entry level price will go down to the point where you can actually profit off of it. And that's what we care about. We care about helping you make money flipping sports cards. Let's say thanks to D-Rock Jag, Mike Chester, Legend X Sports Cards, Live Family Cards one more time, Cardboard Haven, Wrecker My Cards, Foil Breakers, Castaway MF. Live Family Cards says Tyler Huntley as an interesting backup. He's done it before. He's had that little...
Bailey Zappi also just got hired today by the Chiefs, so he's the third string there.
Interesting. What about Joe Milton III? Little rookie action in New England.
Yeah.
No, seriously though, if anyone, I think Michael Penix. Michael Penix would be the obvious choice, right? He'd be the obvious. I've got a stack of his Panini Instants right here. Waiting to sell when that happens. Everybody, thanks for joining us on the Sports Card Strategy Show today. Power-packed show. Thanks to all of you. Don't forget to check out nooffseason.com and a free 30-day trial. We've got a lot of great benefits there. Lefty, anything you want to add before I hit him with the outro, brother?
Love you guys. Man, I couldn't be more excited to be a part of a community like this. But play that rock music!
Thanks so much for being here with us on the Sports Card Strategy Show. To connect with us further, please subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Paul Hickey. Please also give us a follow on Instagram at Sports Card Strategy and on X at No Off Season Card. We also have a Discord that you could join at sportscardstrategy.com. Everyone, I'm Paul Hickey. For the rest of us here at nooffseason.com, have a great day. We'll see you again soon.